Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, your guest host for Point of View.
Well, this is Merrill Matthews. Thank you for joining us. I'm with the Institute for Policy Innovation. I'm sitting in today for Kirby Anderson. And we just thank you for joining us. We have got a jam-packed show today with two issues that are facing the country right now in various ways. We're going to be talking about criminal justice reform. It's a serious issue right now, especially as we see criminal justice issues hitting around the country. And then later in the 1 o'clock hour, we'll be talking with Tom Nelson from Denton Bible Church about depression. He'll be giving a presentation later this month, and it's going to be a widely attended presentation, and it'll give us a chance to talk about some of the depression issues and give you a chance to talk to him. First, we're going to go to Marc Levin with Texas Public Policy Foundation. Marc has been with TPPF. It's a Texas-based nonprofit think tank since 2005, but in 2010, he got interested in, he's been interested in criminal justice issues for some time, and he developed the Right on Crime initiative for TPPF and has become a national leader of criminal justice reform in the country. Marc, are you with us?
Yes, great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Well, it's an interesting issue on criminal justice reform. We had, I think, a decision in Chicago here. Wasn't it Chicago recently in the last few days from a jury? There have been a number of places in the country where people have said they're just not getting, the system is just unjust. So let's start out by just having you discuss, how did you get interested in criminal justice reform? You're an attorney. You've been working on this for a while, but how did you get moving in this area?
Sure. Well, I started the Texas Public Policy Foundation's criminal justice program back in 2005, and TPPF's the free market think tank here in Texas since 1989. But then we launched our Right on Crime initiative in 2010. But basically, for me, I've always been a conservative, and I was skeptical of the role of government in areas like healthcare and education, where, of course, a lot of the results haven't been what we hoped for in terms of more government involvement. And so criminal justice is an area that we really bring the same lens of accountability to what the government is doing, and recognize that there's a real important role for faith-based groups and other entities, not just government, in terms of mentoring and helping people turn their lives around. So we work very closely with Prison Fellowship, for example. They're one of our partners in Right on Crime. And so, but really the reason we got started is one of our board members, Tim Dunn, who's an oilman in Texas, really came at it from a biblical perspective in many ways, and saying, we had built all these prisons and so forth, and we weren't really addressing the needs of victims who often don't get restitution. And that's, in the Bible, it talks about you should pay 3 times back what you steal, and we're charging all these fines and fees that the government collects, but not actually attending to the needs of crime victims in many cases. And then, of course, from a budgetary perspective, Tim had seen that Texas had spent billions of dollars, going from about 30,000 prison beds in the 1980s to about 160,000 in 2005 when I started, and now we've actually been able to close prisons, 8 prisons, in fact. We've reduced crime by over 30% in Texas over the last decade. So our mission is basically to reduce crime and reduce cost to taxpayers, and most importantly, hopefully make sure victims are taken care of and that we have fewer victims in the future and more people working and being productive through changing their life.
Well,
so
now,
that's,
as you pointed out, Texas Public Policy Foundation, it's a think tank based in Austin. It's been around for a number of years. It's in fact one of the most influential think tanks out there among the states, and it's a conservative organization. But conservatives typically conservatives tend to be back the blue, law and order. We want to make sure the laws are implemented and so forth. It sounds a little odd for conservative groups to be looking at criminal justice reform. What happened? Because this has actually spread. Senator Rand Paul and a number of other major conservatives / libertarians have embraced this. What happened to sort of make that a movement rather than just a small group interested in something?
Well, I think the results, it's really that we've demonstrated it's possible to have fewer people in prison, spend less money, but actually have more public safety. And I think that, I think the police by and large do a great job, and I admire their service and bravery. So we're not certainly critical. We do recognize, of course, there are instances where police commit misconduct, just like people in every profession, and they have to be held accountable. But I think obviously that's the exception rather than the rule, thankfully. But I do think that we basically looked at the fact that we were locking up so many people we were mad at and not afraid of, people with a drug problem, people with a mental health issue. And so, I think it's often helpful to think of it as if you had a relative or a close friend who had an addiction or a mental illness, what would you want for them? And I think we would all say we don't want to ignore the problem, but we can do things like drug courts, for example. We've increased those in Texas from 30 in 2005 to now 122. So we're using these types of programs where people get treatment, they're held accountable, they're tested for drugs, they're connected with mentors and faith-based programs, and so we're doing these things to keep people in the community, keep families together. I mean, when you send someone to jail or prison, we have mothers with many children. And again, if it's someone's a danger, that's a side effect we have to incur. But if we have ways of which we do increasingly, ways of holding people accountable in the community and keeping those families together, it's certainly the right thing to do.
Well, we've got a couple of minutes left in this segment, but IPI has also been involved in criminal justice issues, and it's created what we might think of some strange bedfellows. You've got conservatives out there, and in many cases, liberals, people on the far left in some cases, agree with us and create some sort of unusual working relationships, it seems like.
Well, that's true. Newt Gingrich, who was one of our signatories to our Right on Crime Statement of Principles, but he and Van Jones often do joint events on this, and it's one of the very few things they agree on. And so it is true that, and I've often emphasized this isn't a matter of, sometimes when people on the left say we want to work with the right, it means, well, we just have to we compromise our conservative principles by, trying to be friendly with these folks. But really, this is an example where we can actually advance these principles of limited government, personal responsibility. And, some people on the left may have somewhat different reasons why they're engaged on it, but there's a lot in terms of, again, things like getting people treatment who can benefit from it, and really having a smarter system where we distinguish the people that really need to be behind bars from them that don't, and then reentry. Once people come out of prison, removing obstacles for them to get a job and get a place to live and so forth. So there's so many areas where, at the end of the day, certainly we all want a safer society and a society where there's more opportunity even for people who made a mistake, really a second chance society.
Right. If you want to find out more about Marc Levin and Texas Public Policy Foundation, you can go to pointofview.net, click on today's show, and you'll see his bio there, and we'll be back in just a minute.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
A number of columnists and political thinkers have tried to explain why there is so much hate in the public arena. Shelby Steele is a senior fellow at Stanford University's Hoover Institution. He has some profound insights on why the left is consumed with hate. He takes us back to the 1960s when this country finally accepted that slavery and segregation were profound moral failings. So the left put itself in charge of righting this wrong, thus giving it enormous political and cultural power. It also led to the greatest array of government-sponsored social programs in history that have cost more than $22 trillion. He believes that this amounted to a formula for power that goes something like this. The greater the menace to the nation's moral legitimacy, the more power redounded to the left. Soon they had compiled a laundry list of menaces. Racism was at the top of the list, but other bigotry ending in ism and phobia were also making the list. This has created a problem for the left. America has made significant progress in racial issues along with progress with many other issues, and this threatens the left, whose existence is threatened by the diminishment of racial oppression. It must find racism anywhere it can in order to make itself relevant. The white-on-black shooting in Ferguson, Missouri got lots of media attention and even a comment from the President of the United States. During that same period, thousands of black-on-black shootings took place in Chicago, hometown of the then president, yet they inspired very little media coverage and no serious presidential commentary. Today, the left is troubled by its possible obsolescence. There is not enough social menace to service its need for power. It's easy to see why the left is consumed with hate. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores. Point of View, Truth Team 360, Beacon of Truth.
Hello, this is Pastor Jack Graham, commending the ministry of Kirby Anderson and Point of View. Kirby is one of my favorite people personally, and I'm so respectful of his ability to take the issues, speak to them biblically, and communicate in a way that we can all understand. His program, his show, the ministry is vital in our culture in order that we may proclaim the good news of Jesus Christ and teach people God's way of living. I want to encourage you as a listener to support this program financially and prayerfully. And I know Point of View and Kirby Anderson personally would be greatly appreciative.
Point of View, Truth Team 360, Beacon of Truth.
And welcome back. This is Merrill Matthews with the Institute for Policy Innovation, sitting in for Kirby Anderson. And in this hour, we're talking criminal justice reform with Marc Levin. He is the Vice President of Criminal Justice for the Texas Public Policy Foundation. That's a nonprofit think tank based in Texas. And in 2010, he developed their Right on Crime initiative, which works on criminal justice issues and has become something of a national leader on this issue. If you want to know more about Marc or Texas Public Policy Foundation, you can go to our website, pointofview.net, click on today's show, and you'll find information there about Marc, but also some articles by and about him, so you can get more information there. Marc, you had mentioned the prison reform. What are some of the current focus points of Right on Crime right now?
Well, Among I would say, the very important areas that we're focused on is, in fact, reentry. And we started a project called Safe Streets and Second Chances, which really stemmed out of some meetings with Jared Kushner and others at the White House that I was part of going back to October of last year. And really, when the president came into the White House, Jared really, because his father had gone to federal prison, and Jared and Ivanka had visited him and saw, the many challenges that, and again, a lot of people there made really bad choices, but they were being discharged. And of course, Jared's father, was very wealthy and had a lot of opportunity, to reestablish his life, but others did not. And so Jared really wanted to dedicate himself to helping the men that were incarcerated with his father get back on their feet when they leave, so that, again, they're not a threat to anyone and can be productive taxpayers. So we set about looking at what we could do, and the Attorney General even felt that reentry was a really important area to focus on. So it was something the whole White House got behind, and we assisted the administration with reestablishing the Federal Reentry Council. And so through that, there's lots of initiatives going forward through many cabinet agencies, even things like people who have been to prison helping build homes in Baltimore to literally rebuild part of that city, and training people in skills so that when they come out of prison, these are efforts through the Department of Labor, they can do important jobs. I mean, there's, as you know, with the economy going the way it is, there's tremendous demand. Many companies can't find people to do jobs. So I was talking to the head of the prison system in North Dakota, and they have employers coming in for construction jobs. They had gone to the high schools, and none of the kids wanted anything to do with construction. They went to the prisons, and all of a sudden they were able to find people and get them jobs the day they left, because they would train them behind bars in those trades. So it's just common sense things to do like that. And part of what we're doing through this as a policy effort is removing barriers, for example, so people can get a photo ID or driver's license when they leave, which isn't occurring in a number of states. And you think about it, I mean, how are you going to have a job if you can't show who you are? So there's basic things like that.
There's an old saw here about the chain gangs, prisoners going out working on the roads and other things, and generally when that's depicted in movies and so forth, it's tough, it's hard. There's a lot of restrictions there, but is there a movement going which is actually trying to train people either while they're in? I think I read something that Wisconsin here recently was looking at allowing some prisoners to actually take on jobs so they could begin getting some skills so that when they emerge from prison, they're actually trained to do something and I think get paid something.
Yeah, that's right. And here in Texas, what we had found was we were training prisoners to be barbers in some instances, and they would cut hair of other inmates. But when they got out of prison, they couldn't get an occupational license in cosmetology because they had a drug conviction or some other thing. And so we passed some legislation to essentially allow them to obtain a provisional license that would be valid so long, and then turn into a permanent license once they proved they were complying with the law and the rules of occupation and all of that. But for one thing, we have way too many occupations that are licensed. We actually were able to get rid of the shampooing license in Texas in the last. But we really are, I would say, locking people out of their livelihoods in many instances through too much government. But this is a way to, again, get people a skill, and they're doing this in Arizona also, where they have people trained in these construction jobs, and they already have a position as soon as they leave prison, and they're using work release kind of in the so they can start working even before they're completely finished. And then the one issue they found was transportation, because there wasn't public transportation to kind of go build these homes and commercial construction on the edge of Phoenix. So what the Governor Ducey did in Arizona is he partnered with Uber, and the state's paying for half of the rides and the Uber pays for half. And until these guys have enough money from the job, which isn't long. I mean, you work for, a month and you've got enough money saved up for your transportation, but they just need that initial opportunity.
Well, it's interesting because you in things that you've written, you cite the prison, the incarceration rates declining, the crime rates falling. Are those a direct result of your efforts, or are they just part of an improving economy? Can you show direct results from what Right on Crime is doing?
Yeah, well, I'd say it's a combination of both, but part of the thing in Texas is If you look at since we began these efforts of, as I said, expanding drug courts and other treatment, and also really improving the probation and parole system, half of the people that go into prison were on some type of supervision, whether it's probation or parole. So, and about half of those are people that it's technical violations like missing a meeting and things. So it's a lot of states, including Texas, have said, well, let's do a better job of responding to those with what we call like swift and certain sanctions. So if you miss a meeting, we don't just wait they pile up and then revoke someone to prison. We go ahead and say, well, okay, well, I give you a curfew or additional reporting, or maybe you'll have to spend the weekend in jail. But it's basically it's the sureness and swiftness of the sanction, not the duration, that typically changes behavior. So we've done things like that. So, yeah, the bottom line in Texas is not only can we say that overall crime has fallen about 30%, but we also can zoom in on, for example, and say that there's thousands of fewer new offenses by people on probation and parole, and that's really, because that kind of disaggregates it from the overall crime trend. So I think that's really why the whole nation has kind of taken notice and said, well, look, if Texas, and we're still tough on crime, obviously, for people that, do heinous acts, but if Texas, particularly focusing on nonviolent offenders, can be able to close 8 prisons and have this crime drop that's exceeded the national crime drop. And there are reasons in terms of demographics why we've had this great drop in crime since the 90s in the United States. But I think that certainly there's parts of this country that still have very high crime rates, whether it's, inner city Chicago or Baltimore, and even parts of some of our big cities in Texas. So one of the things we've really focused on is ways also to improve policing to actually deter crime. And so if you have, for example, police building closer relationships with neighborhoods so that people actually provide tips on those who need to be taken off the streets, that really is very important. And so, and also just police visibility on things like, auto break-ins, for example. If there's research showing if you have police in these hot spots visible, a lot of these crimes of opportunity actually never happen.
Take about 30 seconds, 45 seconds to talk a bit about bail reform, where people who are maybe just are being arrested for loitering or something, put in jail, they don't have just even a little bit of money to pay for their bail, and so they end up having to stay in jail even though they're not violent. They could be released, but they just don't have the money.
Yeah, so I'm glad you mentioned that. There's litigation that's ongoing in Houston, Dallas, Galveston, El Paso. So really the question is, should we base whether someone stays in jail prior to their trial on risk to public safety, or should it be based on how much money they have? And obviously we would be in the former camp, and I think that, it's important to remember the Constitution in everything we do, and there's a presumption of innocence. And over 20% of people that are arrested are never charged or convicted of anything. Doesn't mean they're all actually innocent, but the burden's on the government to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that somebody committed a crime. And, I think that the other thing is we know that if somebody's in jail for even 72 hours or more...
Mark, hold that thought just a second. Sure. We're going to have to take a break. We'll be back in just a minute.
April 18th, 1775. The long-feared approach of danger was now real. The British were moving, and Paul Revere mounted his horse for a ride that would go down in history in the battle for American liberty. 2 beacons were placed in the steeple of the Old North Church, alerting the people in Charlestown the redcoats were coming by sea. 2 beacons shining in the night, signaling our forefathers to make their stand. Today's threats to our freedom are perhaps less visible than an army on the move, but they are no less real. Where are today's beacons, today's defenders of liberty? One is Point of View Radio. The other is you. Together, let us stand for all of our freedoms to preserve what our founders won. Be the fire in our beacon today by joining the Point of View Truth Team. Join the fight this week at pointofview.net/team. Pointofview.net/team, or call 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, your guest host for Point of View.
And we're back. Thank you for joining us. We're with Marc Levin, the Vice President of Criminal Justice for the Texas Public Policy Foundation and the founder of their Right on Crime initiative. Marc, we were talking about bail. Go ahead and finish your thought on that.
Yes. So basically, there's a lot of litigation now going on because a number of jurisdictions, including cities in Texas, have been keeping people in jail basically who are low risk for misdemeanors and other minor offenses, simply because they don't have a certain amount of money. In some cases, it's $500 or 10% of $500 to pay a commercial bail bondsman. But there's people that are homeless and so forth that just don't have that money. And so our position has been that we ought to really use risk assessment instruments which look at, does the person have a previous failure to appear in court? Do they have a previous violent conviction? Are there really reasons to keep them in jail because of a danger to the public? And so there are a lot of changes going on with many states and cities really revising their approach to this to do that, and also to make sure there's due process. I think that's obviously a core element of the Constitution. The Bill of Rights is due process, and it was shown, for example, in Dallas, there was a 15-second hearing on bail, and the person didn't have an opportunity to talk. They didn't have a lawyer, so the defendant really wasn't getting any type of individualized consideration by the judge as to whether or not they should stay in jail. And the reason this is so important is if you're in jail for even 72 hours, you can lose your job, lose a place to live, and a lot of the research shows, therefore, you actually become more of a risk as your life is turned upside down than if you had been released. And it can certainly be with supervision, whether it's electronic monitoring or other approaches to make sure that people do come back to court.
If you'd like to talk to Mark, it's 1-800-351-1212, 1-800-351-1212. Mark, let's talk a little bit about a group that I just think has done the Lord's work in many cases. It's called the Innocence Project. You know, we've had this debate about accusations that don't have any corroboration, don't have any evidence. With Judge Kavanaugh's hearing, I did a piece in The Hill saying, you know, there actually are places out there where people have been falsely convicted. They've either been misidentified or falsely identified. And I went through several pieces, stories from the Innocence Project where they've gone through and gotten people exonerated based on DNA evidence. Some of these people were in jail for 20, 30, nearly 40 years. There are false convictions out there, and we need to be able to address those. Have you had any involvement with the Innocence Project, or do you follow their work?
Oh, very much so. In fact, we have been involved here in Texas in advancing many important issues as far as innocence. The Michael Morton Project, Michael Morton Bill, which we worked with the Innocence Project on a few sessions ago, and effectively what that does is require that prosecutors turn over any exculpatory evidence, evidence showing the person may not have been the one who did the crime, turn that over to the defense. So that really was a big step forward. And then in the most recent legislative session in Texas, we helped pass what's been called the gold standard for jailhouse informants legislation. Now, obviously, jailhouse informants are people that claim to have information about other crimes, and of course, in exchange for that information, they get typically a promise of leniency in their own case. So there's incentive sometimes to provide information that's not correct, to make up things. And so what was interesting is in Tarrant County, Fort Worth, the district attorney there actually became a real champion of this reform because they had a jailhouse informant who concocted stories, told one prosecutor, then told another in another case, and they didn't have a way of keeping track of that they had been bamboozled by this guy before. So they developed a log and a system. And, of course, what the legislation does is essentially say that any offers made to these jailhouse informants for leniency in their own case, those have to be disclosed to the defense and the court and the jury. So it's basically just a matter of transparency. So there's also other issues with wrongful convictions, DNA testing, making sure that lineups are not suggestive. There's ways to sometimes where these lineups that a witness would look at are presented in a way to lead them to say that a certain person is the one they saw. So there's a lot of errors in eyewitness testimony sometimes. So, you know, it's a really important area. Certainly, we know sometimes people that have information about crimes aren't Mother Teresa themselves, but by the same token, we have to have some mechanisms, and a lot of district attorney offices have now set up wrongful conviction units to go back and look at previous cases, especially with newly available science like DNA testing, and really make sure that, I mean, everyone wants the right person, especially the victim and the victim's family. It's an injustice to them, again, if we have the wrong person.
1-800-351-1212. If you'd like to talk to Marc, 1-800-351-1212. Marc, let's touch on one of the most bizarre things we have out there in criminal justice issue. Civil asset forfeiture. I know we've worked on it a little bit. I've written a little bit about it. But explain to the audience what civil asset forfeiture is.
Certainly. Well, this is where, if you're pulled over on the side of the road, and even for a speeding ticket, the police can take everything in your car, anything of value, whether it's jewelry or cash. And then if it's a burden of proof is on you to file a civil lawsuit to show that that property was not connected with the crime.
It's because the property is actually the one being charged with the crime, not you that has the property. It's the property, isn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so these cases are often styled when you see them in court as, the state of Texas versus 1999 Chevrolet Blazer. And, of course, that gets to the other issue is typically the property is not worth, in most cases, more than the few $1,000s it would cost to hire an attorney. So a lot of the property ends up going to the government, and it's typically split between police and prosecutors. So, of course, they have an incentive to focus on forfeitures. But it's not worth it for the person to pursue a civil lawsuit to get their property back. So it just goes to the government by default in so many cases. And, what we're saying is certainly we want to be able to seize contraband from drug kingpins and all of that. The question is the title. When does the title pass to the government, even if it's been seized? And what we've said is that should be only after there's a conviction, except in a couple cases where, for example, you have a foreign entity that's outside the jurisdiction of the United States, so we can't get a conviction against them. So there are a few exceptions, but for the most part, I think it's this basically turns the whole system on its head when you have to prove that the property was not involved in a crime. The burden should be on the government to prove that.
And some of these are perfectly innocent. If I remember right, there was a case of an evangelist who had just given a revival. They had taken a love offering. He had got a fair amount of cash from that love offering and was driving with that. The police pulled him over and began searching and found out that there was money in there, and that was more than what one might normally think a person would have, and they confiscated the money.
Yeah, do you remember there was a Christian band it was either Thailand or Burma, but they were in Oklahoma, and they had tens of thousands of dollars that they had raised for charity through their performances forfeited. And, eventually after a huge public outcry and the fact that they were never convicted of anything, it was returned. But there's a lot of horror stories. And, there's a case, one of the first cases that actually Justice Kavanaugh may rule on is a forfeiture case called Timms, out of Indiana, and we actually filed an amicus brief in that case. But it's a little different scenario because here the guy was actually, Mr. Timms, he was legitimately convicted of a low-level opioid offense. He had addiction, but the government seized his SUV, which is worth $40,000. And there's a provision in the Constitution that there should not be excessive bail, fines, or fees. And so the issue in the case is whether, because it's totally disproportionate to the offense, and it's conceded by the government that he didn't purchase, the drugs had nothing to do, he was given the SUV by his father. So we'll see what happens in that case, but I'm hopeful that there will be there does need to be proportionality, between the forfeiture, I think, and what the crime was.
And I think, generally speaking, President Trump has been for civil asset forfeiture in the couple of comments he's made early in his administration.
Well, there was one meeting with these sheriffs, I guess, about 6 or 9 months ago, and I think, the president, there was no one there to present the other side of it. So, I think that probably he might later have a different view. But I think that the Department of Justice undoubtedly, again, they have an interest in it. The money that's taken goes to fund. And most of it's used for legitimate things, but, there were cases in Texas where it was used for margarita machines and a trip to Hawaii.
We'll be back in just a minute.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Riley Bembry returned from World War I a changed man. Upon his return, this former Army medic settled in Los Angeles and became a butcher. But the city could not contain him, and he headed into the Mojave Desert and became a prospector. By the time the Great Depression gripped the nation, other veterans of the Great War had found their way to Bembry's cabin, each seeking to escape the emotional and physical scars left from the war. Together in 1934, they erected a simple 7-foot monument atop a rocky outcropping not far from Bembry's cabin, but miles and miles from anything else. They chose a common symbol to honor war dead, a white cross, and dedicated it to honor the dead of all wars. When Bembry died in 1984, Henry Sandoz, Bembry's close friend, began to care for the Mojave Desert Veterans Memorial Cross. In 2001, someone sued. A judge would eventually order the memorial hidden from view, literally covered with a padlocked bag, while the case was decided. First Liberty had the privilege of working with Henry Sandoz, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, the American Legion, and others to defend that memorial. Before he was senator, Ted Cruz volunteered his time as lead counsel on the case. Because of Henry Sandoz, Ted Cruz, Veterans of Foreign Wars, the American Legion, and First Liberty, that memorial still stands today just where Bembry placed it in honor of the dead of all wars. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
You can learn how to protect religious freedom in the workplace, public schools, your church, the military, and more by downloading First Liberty's free Religious Liberty Protection Kits at firstliberty.org. That's firstliberty.org. If you want hope for religious freedom, go to firstliberty.org.
Point of View, Truth Team 360, Beacon of Truth.
When my children were very small, I started listening, and even before they were school-aged, my eyes started being opened, and I started realizing that there was another religion being taught in our public schools, and I just wanted to let y'all know today I am joining. I just feel like that if the information is not there, then a lot of other ministries will not even have a chance to be where they are and do what they do.
I always wanted to give because I thought that Point of View really brings a lot of things out here in the open that you don't hear anywhere else. And it's unbelievable how much control they have over the minds of the people in this country and around the world. It's hard for me to believe that people fall for all this junk that they spread around. But what I like, Kirby and Penna, and I knew when I was hearing on there, well, I could count on it being something that you could check into it, and the proof would be there.
Point of View, Truth Team 360, Beacon of Truth.
And we're back with our final segment with Marc Levin of the Texas Public Policy Foundation. He's Vice President of Criminal Justice there and the initiator of the right on crime. Mark, you've mentioned things about Texas, and Texas seems like it's doing an exemplary job. Give us some of the other states that might be doing a good job on criminal justice reform, and some states that may be doing a terrible job on that.
Sure. Well, that's a great question. I think, it's undoubtedly Texas, Georgia, South Carolina. These are some of the states, all under, conservative governors that have really advanced these alternatives we talked about, such as drug courts, faith-based programs for especially nonviolent offenders, and removing barriers to occupational licenses and things like that. So there's really been a huge trend of some of and it is the states in the South, for example, that had the highest incarceration rates. So they were sending some of the, kind of lowest hanging fruit to prison to begin with. So that's also true. But I think, some of the issues we're seeing still are in those big cities, like Chicago, for example, where there's a lack of confidence in the police and a lot of tension between neighborhoods and police. And when, people in these areas are not reporting crimes to the police, then it allows who's ever perpetrating those, and often, unfortunately, violent offenses, they're able to kind of continue with impunity. And so it's really critical to kind of reestablish order. And so rather than, we need to prosecute the individual offenses, to be sure, but we also have to change the dynamics in these neighborhoods. And so there's some examples of ways to do that. Cure Violence, Operation Ceasefire, where you actually have, in some cases, there are people that were once in a gang going in and through mentoring and things like that, they're going in and saying, here's a way out to some of these young men that are caught up in this gang. And some of the examples they've been able to, like in Boston and Cincinnati, they've been able to get, 80 or 90% of these young men, and they're offering them career opportunities, things to get on the right side of the law. And, they're told also, well, there's a federal prosecutor. We'll throw the book at you if you don't do this. But some of these meetings are involving grandmothers, ministers. They're all coming around these guys and saying, look, we can't have the open-air drug dealing in the park where we're walking our kids. We have to change this. And so it is offering kind of a carrot-and-stick approach and a path to redemption. And, a lot of it's basically separating the wheat from the chaff. And so you're getting the people that were willing to step out of this lifestyle to do that. And so I think doing things like that, we can really change the conditions that give rise to some of these really dangerous areas.
Well, the crime has typically been a state and local issue. Is there a role for the federal government in here? Are there things the federal government should be doing?
Well, you're right about that. I think under the Constitution, the 10th Amendment, it really is primarily, other than obviously, terrorism and crimes across state lines and things like that. But I think there are some cases certainly involving organized crime, that the complexity of them is such that having the resources of the Department of Justice is very valuable. So, that's certainly a role. And then, the federal government does give out a lot of money in terms of grants, whether to support, we just actually, the opioid bill that just was passed by both houses of Congress includes a lot of money for treatment.
Does it do a good job on handing out that money?
Well, in most cases, and this is true under the Cures Act, which was the first opioid legislation that was passed about a year and a half ago. So most of the money is going to state agencies, like in Texas, the Texas Department of Health Services, and so they're actually dispensing it to treatment programs and so forth. So, I think it's a little too early to tell. I think the good news is it's not all centralized in Washington, that it is being, the agencies at the state level are getting that money, and they're closer and perhaps know better what's needed in the community. So, but it is important to have, performance measures, to have accountability anytime these funds are distributed.
And you have had a few, and I mentioned earlier, Senator Rand Paul has stepped up and addressed some of this in general forums. Are there some leaders in Congress that are trying to, that want to see something happen here?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, certainly on the House side, we actually just did an event on Friday in Washington with Congressman Doug Collins, a conservative lawmaker from Georgia, who's the co-author of the First Step Act, which passed. Only 3 Republicans voted against it in the House. There were 2/3 of Democrats even voted for it. It had like 330 votes or something.
Bipartisanship, it happens.
Yeah, and this is prisoner reentry, rehabilitation program in federal prisons, earning time off by completing programs for low-risk inmates and so forth. And it also says pregnant women can't be shackled in birth. I mean, who could want to shackle pregnant women in prison? So it's a great bill, and there's some provisions being added in the Senate. I think what we're encountering is there are many Democrats who want to get something done, but there's also the temptation of some people to say, let's have a campaign issue for next time. So but I think the votes are going to be there. We're very hopeful that, and I think the White House is behind this, that this can move forward after the election, but before the new Congress is seated in the Senate. And as I say, having already passed the House overwhelmingly, if in fact the Senate acts in November or December, we'll be able to get this to the desk of President Trump, who said he'll sign. Just get him the bill.
Well, thank you, Mark, for all the work that you've done on this for Texas Public Policy Foundation and their efforts on both working on these issues and highlighting them on a national level. If you want to find out more about Mark and Texas Public Policy Foundation, their Right on Crime initiatives, and read some of the things by and about Mark, you can go to pointofview.net, pointofview.net. Click on to the Today's Show, and you'll find Mark's bio there, along with some articles that he's written. I think there's one there that I did on the Innocence Project recently about the problem with people being misidentified, even in sexual assault cases. So, Mark, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to talk again soon.
Thank you so much.
And when we come back, we're changing gears. We're moving to the issue of depression, one of those things that Christians just simply have not talked about very much. But we've got one of the what's become one of the country's experts on this. I think he was dragged kicking and screaming into this issue because he didn't go to address it individually. But we've got Tom Nelson from Denton Bible Church will be joining us in the next hour, and actually the next 2 hours, to talk about depression, his experience with that, and what he's learned from this issue. It is something that challenges Christians as well as non-Christians, and it's something that we need to address, but not many people have a very good handle on how Christians should be addressing it, or even if they can address it effectively. So stay with us. We'll be back in just a few minutes.
It's called normalcy bias, and studies estimate around 70% of people suffer from it even after disaster strikes. Normalcy bias says even though things might look bad, somehow everything will continue as it always has. But in times of great threat, that assumption can be deadly. If freedom is to be preserved, people like you and I have to work just as hard as those who are trying to restrict religious freedom, those who reject the godly wisdom that brought us liberty. Point of View has been a beacon of truth for more than 45 years, but we dare not assume that will always be the case. Be the fire in our beacon today. Join the Point of View Truth Team. Take a few moments right now and visit pointofview.net/team or call 1-800-347-5151. Be among those who see the threat and take action. Be a beacon of truth. Pointofview.net/team and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of view, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, your guest host for Point of View.
And welcome back. This is Merrill Matthews with the Institute for Policy Innovation, sitting in for Kirby Anderson today, and we've got a major program coming up. I've been looking forward to this for some time. We have with us Tom Nelson. He's the pastor at Denton Bible Church, and Tom has, over the past decade or so, become something of an authority on the issue of depression because it happened to him. And we're going to talk with Tom about this and get his thoughts on it and give you a chance to weigh in on it. Now, the reason we're doing this now, Tom has got a program coming up at McLean Bible Church in Vienna, Virginia, on October the 19th and October the 20th. That's a Friday and Saturday. He'll be presenting a long form of what we're going to be talking about today. It'll be live streaming. So you can find out about that. In fact, you can go to Point of View's website, pointofview.net. Click on today's show. You'll see Tom's picture there, and underneath there is a link to finding out more about that program if you want to. That's going to be a 4-hour program, so it's a long one. So, Tom, thank you for joining us today.
Delighted to be here with you again.
We've talked about depression in the past. It is an issue that weighs heavily on us because Christians typically haven't talked much about depression over the years, and for some reasons we just sort of not paid much attention to it. And if you had it, it seemed like it was something that was genetic. You sort of had it from the beginning. You fought with it all your life, but that's not your story. Tell us about your story.
You know, I was a focused individual all of my life. My major purpose was football. And everything I did was submissive to the idea of excellence in football. And then I saw that it really wasn't going to fulfill my life. And so I became a Christian in 1973. And all of my life there became subservient to the gospel and to the Bible. And so I had been an evangelist for a year. I had been a college youth director in a Methodist church. And then I went to Dallas Seminary, and we helped start Denton Bible, and we saw it grow. I did the Prestonwood, the Bible study there that we had, Metro Bible study, and it grew to thousands. We had the Young Guns
Song
program.
of Solomon, I think
Song
you
of
did that.
Solomon came out of that. So I was always, Merrill, just completely, totally focused. I loved getting up in the morning. I would teach 13 times. This is about 2006. I would teach 13 times a week. Leave on Friday, head to a Song of Solomon conference, speak 3 times, sign books, go to bed, hopped up on Dr. Pepper, take something to knock me out, get up, speak 3 more times, get back on the plane, get to Denton, preach 4 times, get up in the morning, start my training and discipleship, and would teach all together about 13 times during the week. I was writing books, writing commentaries, and the only reason that I couldn't do 8 days a week is I didn't have 8 days a week. I loved what I was doing. And then all of a sudden, just physically, one Sunday night, it's like somebody just pulled the plug on me. And I just ran out of gas, and then it became like a painful thing in my body. My body was aching. I didn't know why. And then I couldn't sleep. And then I ended up going into a hospital stay that put me to sleep and gave me some morphine for the pain. I didn't know what it was, and I didn't have time to worry about it because I had a conference coming off on the taping of Romans. And I had a church that I was running with about 3,000 to 4,000 people. And then it kind of one day it dropped from a physical pain inside of me to an emotional deadness. And I remember thinking to myself, Merrill, I was sitting in the house, and I thought, so this is depression. And then it escalated, and it became the phenomena of clinical anxiety. And basically, I could put my legs on my wife's lap, and she could feel the electricity. She could feel the crackling in them. I couldn't sit for over 20 seconds. I was always moving. I said to my wife, I am Marley's ghost, always not at rest. I couldn't read, couldn't watch a TV show, and it was a living hell. And the scariest thing was I didn't know what it was, and I basically went for about 2 months of not knowing. I took time off from the pulpit, and I didn't know what it was. I had 2 more complete physicals, one at Baylor Med, one at Cooper Clinic, another in Denton, another hospital stay, until finally my doctor, my internist, asked his Hindu psychiatrist friend, because psychiatry had never dawned on me, but I knew there was something wrong with me. And he said, here's what his symptoms are. And this fellow said, he is garden variety. He said, I talked to him dozens of times a day. And he even described my personality without meeting me. He said, this is who he is. And like American men, he has created his own tsunami and his own tidal wave that is success, and he's running in front of it. He serves it. No, it doesn't serve him. And he said it is about to take him under. What he's got to do is shut his schedule down, find what is the point that is causing stress, and then he needs a medication. He needs a pill, something that will get his balance back. And he suggested a certain medication that was basically a pill. He suggested something to help me sleep. And heck, Merrill, I would have taken anything he said. People will say to me as a Christian, how do you balance being a Christian taking medication? And I said, you've never had this, have you? Because if you had had this, you would not ask that question. How can you square being a Christian and taking insulin for your diabetes? There's no question. You do what you have to do. How can you be a Christian and square it with taking chemo for your cancer? So we're not, Tennessee snake handlers. We do feel that there is a place that disease comes, and God gives Paul the good Dr. Luke. And so I took what he said, and it balanced me out. Basically, it takes about 4 weeks. If you're lucky, it works within about 4 weeks, and slowly and surely, what is called your serotonin level begins to balance out. In the case of depression, it stimulates some things in you that are not working well, and it gets them up there either way. And so I went through it. And when you disappear from pulpit for 4 months, you don't just say, I'm back. You have to explain it. And with most Christians, they won't say that they've been through a depression or anxiety because we moralize it. We get Job's friends on it real quickly. Every other disease will say, I'll pray for you. But if it's depression or something, that it's more in the mind, we tend to moralize it. What are you doing wrong? What sin have you done? You need to just act like it's not occurring. And so I got in the middle of it, and I got to doing better. I got back to normal, and I went and spoke to Dallas Seminary on it. And when I spoke, I had guys about 6 deep lined up wanting to talk. It's the thing that they say that if you take a crowd and you say to everybody, stand up, now sit down if you've had anxiety or depression. Now sit down if your mate has had it. Now sit down if your family members have had it. Now sit down if your good friends have had it. Most everyone there is sitting down. 40 million Americans have it, but we don't talk about it. Unless you're a celebrity. Brooke Shields talked about it. Charles Haley talked about it. There's a basketball player now that has gone through it, and he talked about it. But no one ever talks about it. Well, I had to talk about it, and I got calls from all over the country. I mean, from guys that were professors at college, at seminaries, at whatever, at missionaries, saying, help me, because they heard my broadcast, and they said, that's me.
Well, we'll get back and find out more about that after this break. Stay with us.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
A number of columnists and political thinkers have tried to explain why there is so much hate in the public arena. Shelby Steele is a senior fellow at Stanford University's Hoover Institution. He has some profound insights on why the left is consumed with hate. He takes us back to the 1960s when this country finally accepted that slavery and segregation were profound moral failings. So the left put itself in charge of righting this wrong, thus giving it enormous political and cultural power. It also led to the greatest array of government-sponsored social programs in history that have cost more than $22 trillion. He believes that this amounted to a formula for power that goes something like this. The greater the menace to the nation's moral legitimacy, the more power redounded to the left. Soon they had compiled a laundry list of menaces. Racism was at the top of the list, but other bigotry ending in ism and phobia were also making the list. This has created a problem for the left. America has made significant progress in racial issues along with progress with many other issues, and this threatens the left, whose existence is threatened by the diminishment of racial oppression. It must find racism anywhere it can in order to make itself relevant. The white-on-black shooting in Ferguson, Missouri got lots of media attention and even a comment from the President of the United States. During that same period, thousands of black-on-black shootings took place in Chicago, hometown of the then president, yet they inspired very little media coverage and no serious presidential commentary. Today, the left is troubled by its possible obsolescence. There is not enough social menace to service its need for power. It's easy to see why the left is consumed with hate. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores. Point of View, Truth Team 360, Beacon of Truth.
Hi, everybody. This is Gary Bauer with American Values in Washington, D.C. You know, I've been involved in big battles in Washington for many, many years, and in those battles, time and time again, it's been Point of View Radio and Kirby Anderson who's provided me with a platform to sound the alarm. It doesn't matter whether the battle was over the sanctity of human life or preserving religious liberty or defending marriage. Kirby Anderson and Point of View have always been there standing strong. That's why today I'm asking you to join me in giving the most generous contribution you can to Point of View Radio. You know, Point of View and Kirby don't get big subsidies from Washington, D.C. like some liberals do. They depend on generous donors like you who believe in family, faith, and freedom.
Point of View, Truth Team 360, Beacon of Truth.
And we're back. This is Merrill Matthews with the Institute for Policy Innovation, sitting in for Kirby Anderson today. And with me is Tom Nelson, pastor of Denton Bible Church. And we're talking about the issue of depression. In the first segment, Tom was talking a bit about how it hit him, sort of adult onset depression. And Tom, go ahead and you began sharing your story with people because they were demanding what's happened to you.
Southwest Seminary called me, said, hey, could you speak on this? Went up to Southern Seminary and addressed it. Spoke about it, focus on the family. Would you talk about this? Family life, would you talk about this? Long story short, the American society mass produces depression and anxiety. I went to a particular psychiatrist, and that was hard for me. I remember a guy over at the medical center, he said, you definitely have clinical anxiety. First, there was a woman that was a doctor at Cooper Clinic that checked me out and said, "You're perfectly healthy. You have clinical anxiety. You probably need to start on Xanax." And I said to her, "I'm not a sophomore girl." She should have knocked me off my stool. But later, a fellow at Medical City said, "No, I'm sorry. You have clinical anxiety." And he said, "You really need to start on a SSRI, serotonin-specific reuptake inhibitor that'll allow your body. It's going to take you about 4 weeks. For 6 days, you're going to feel like a menopausal woman. You may have some hot flashes, but it will begin to balance out, and then we'll tweak it from there." And so that's what he told me. But I went to a psychiatrist. They said, "You ought to visit one." Now, to me, Merrill, that was like Saul going to the Witch of Endor. All right, going to a psychiatrist. A Christian isn't supposed to go to one. And yet,
even though James Dobson was a psychologist, I believe, and
yes, and I found out that's real. A psychiatrist basically medicates problems of the mind. It's not something you have to operate on. You don't do MRIs. It's just something. Your mind is not this objective, free-floating, perfectly rational thing outside of you. It's connected to you, and it's affected by you. And so he said, "You ought to visit with one." Well, I went to one here in Dallas, a Christian guy, and he just educated me on this. And he said, really, he said, the Hindu guy told you right. You need to find your stress point. He said, you're running on adrenaline. He said, you produce the byproduct of cortisol, and it inhibits sereneness, serotonin, that lets your mind work well. And the hole you fall into, you recognize as depression and or anxiety. And he said, you simply have to build back your own natural things. He said, in the old days, would he give you maybe Valium or lithium or something as a happy pill that wears off? He said, these will allow your own body to correct itself. And so, and it did. Some guys it works slower. Some guys you got to tweak it. There is a kind of person that is resistant that you have to kind of work with. What do they call it? Medication resistant. With me, I was just garden variety. And within about 4 weeks, it just kind of lifted. But he said to me, the American population is ready-made for this. He said, when you go to Europe and you come to America, you can feel America. It climbs on you. And in other cultures, there's kind of still at place a feudal system. You're born into wealth or born out of wealth, and you're going to marry within that and stay within that. Ambition isn't really a side product in Europe as it is in America. In America, ambition and America are synonyms. You come to America to be successful, which usually means money, prestige, land, holdings, material, and we're always on the run in America. And in America, once you achieve it, it doesn't mean you can keep it. You can lose it, or you can get knocked off, or you can get retired, or you can get taken over. And so he said the American population leads the world in coffee to get you going and whiskey to put you to sleep. And so we're an intense place. And he listened to my schedule, and he said, no wonder you think you're going crazy. He said, I'm going crazy listening to you. He said, nobody can do this. He said, you might have done it when you were 30, but you're not going to do it anymore. He said, you have to protect. I remember him saying, God rigged the world that it turns on its axis in front of a stationary light source, so it appears. And so you have dark and night. And God said, darkness and night, or darkness and light, one day, you have to shut down at about 6 o'clock and rest. And the woman would do the darning, the man would work on the lawnmower, and you'd sit on the porch and you drink lemonade. But with the innovation of Edison, Henry Ford, and Rockefeller, we've turned day into night. I'm sorry, we've turned night into day. You now have a nightlife. We never rest. And he said, you can get away with that for a little while, but not ultimately, that you will give way. I remember him laughingly saying, that's why I drive a Bentley. He said, are guys like you. He said, I have a VIP parking space in my back that I would amaze you with the people that you know, that they're all the same guys. He said, if it makes you feel any better, he said, bums don't fall into this so much. It's always type A individuals that are classic Americans that are on a dead run. He said, you guys do it.
Is there a cure for it, or once you get clinical depression, do you always have clinical depression and you have to fight it?
Once you get on top of it, you're okay. You don't fall back. Now, he said to me, 37% of the people, I don't know where he got it, but he said 37% of the people that need to be on medication need to stay on medication. 61% don't. And I'm one of those 37%. I tried 4 times to get off of it. just because I was insulted at the idea of having to take a pill. All right. But I take the pill. And so once you have it, you're not going to fall back into it. If you get off of it, off your medication, you might. But generally what you have to do, Merrill, is you have to find what they call your stress point. What is causing your stress point? A lot of people, it's marriage, maybe a kid. It may be a singular event that you can't get out of your head, almost like PTSD, that you can't leave it behind. It may be the fear of you're having to go through chemotherapy. It can be an event, but generally it's a slow, gradual buildup of pressure and of tension, and you have to alter your schedule and start protecting your nights and your mornings and finding the things that you love to do, and you just have to take it a lot easier than you're taking it.
And that's what you're doing now?
Yeah, I cut my schedule ridiculously. I had 4 jobs now. I am a pastor. I'm just like a little church in the Wildwood, and I'm enjoying life so much. I don't travel near as much. Travel is it's stressful. It's stressful.
Yeah.
Airports are stressful. Making deadlines is stressful. And so I try my best just to relax. I only teach once a week outside of my pulpit, or twice a week, and once on a Thursday night and once on a Thursday afternoon. But I just relax a whole lot more than I used to. I do the things I enjoy, love to lift weights, love to run, love good coffee, love good fellowship, love my grandkids. And sometimes when you go through it, Merrill, you have what is called, they call them neurological memories. Like when you're driving your wagon over previous roads and there are ruts that are in the road, you can slip into them. When you've been through what I've been through, that you can have memories, just feelings that bring back memories of things. Sometimes with me, it's not getting adequate sleep, and that feeling of being sleepy can hit a trigger. I have a friend that it's whenever his blood pressure goes up that it'll hit a trigger. Sometimes we all have stress. You and I both have stress and things that cause your stomach to get queasy. So we've always had that. And I remember him saying to me, this psychiatrist, he said, this medication's not going to make you non-anxious. He said, that's not good. He said, that's part of life, but it lets you play with it on a level playing field. It doesn't get loose on you. And so you'll have certain feelings that'll bring back memories, but you learn just to wait through them and to let God be in control. It was one of the most spiritualizing things. It was better than 2 years of seminary just to go through this.
Well, and harder, I guess.
Yes, the tuition is extreme.
Except you didn't have to learn Greek going through this.
Yes.
Well, you had people come to you wanting to know about your experience and to see if they could learn something. So when we come back, I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the people that came to you and said, tell us what's happening here and how, so that they could begin to sort of address this issue themselves. And if you want to talk to Tommy, you can come to him, 1-800-351-1212, 1-800-351-1212, and we'll be back in just a minute.
Protect the health of the nation. Join the Point of View Truth Team. Pointofview.net/team. Pointofview.net/team. Or call 800-347-5151.
So there's this guy named Jordan. He's a healthy guy. He's a dad of 6, and he works as a guide in Alaska. And he goes to the doctor, true story, he goes to the doctor and he's diagnosed with cancer, stage 4. And here's the thing. He had switched earlier from medical insurance to Medishare, where Christians share each other's medical bills. So the question for Jordan and his wife, Jenny, was, is this actually going to work?
Our medical bills exceeded $160,000. Medishare members shared all our bills.
And it was about more than just the money, too. This is a real community.
Medishare is a family, a group of people that stick with you through the hardest times of your life. I just don't know how I could have done it without Medishare.
It's so worth looking into. There's a reason this is growing so fast. So if you want to find out more, here is a number for you, 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE.
Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, your guest host for Point of View.
And this is Merrill Matthews sitting in for Kirby Anderson today, and we are here with Tom Nelson talking about the issue of depression. If you want to find out more about Tom and Denton Bible Church, he's the pastor of that. You can go to pointofview.net. And click on today's show, and you'll see a short biography of Tom. He's been working with the issue and talking about the issue of depression for some time. In fact, a few years ago, you wrote a book, Tom, Walking on Water, When You Feel Like You're Drowning. It chronicles your experience with depression and what you were going through. Now, we're talking about this in part because in coming up later this month, you're doing a program in McLean, Virginia, McLean Bible Church. Right. And it's going to be a 2-day program where you're talking about the things that you went through and what you've learned from this and what other people might learn and what the Bible's doing. And if you're interested in finding out more about that, you can go to pointofview.net, and we've got information there by Tommy's name in his bio. We've got information there about how you can find out more about it. And those of you who are live streaming this, you can find something out there on the website. We've got a page up there that discusses that. If you're interested, if you want to talk to Tom, 1-800-351-1212, 1-800-351-12. We're going to open up the phones. If you've got questions about his experience and some of the things that you're going through, he is not a medical doctor, but he has experienced it and had to walk through this, and now he's taken on the position of having to talk to other Christians about it. What you mentioned that when you would give a presentation at the seminar, like Dallas Theological Seminary or something, people lined up. They wanted to know what kind of things are they experiencing.
Well, they'll say to me, like when I found guys that went through what I went through. I found out a fellow named Grady. Then there was a fellow named Steve that I co-wrote the book with. And when I found out they went through this, I would say to them, "Say to me, I'm going to make it through this." And I would say, "What did you go through?" And they would say what they went through. And I said, "That's me. Did you experience this?" "Yes." "Did you experience this?" And that was the most wonderful, he comforts us in all our affliction so that we might comfort those in any affliction. With the comfort, we ourselves were comforted by God. And when they said, "I've been there," I thought, wow. When Peter said, "The same experiences of suffering are being accomplished by your brethren who are in the world," that I think Peter said that and Paul said that it makes you just rejoice that I'm not alone out there. And so people will hear my deal and they'll say, "That's me." And I go, "Yeah, this is not that strange a deal. It's been around for a long time." In the old days, they just called it melancholy. But yeah, and they'll say, "What are you going through?" And then they always ask, "What do I need to do?" When you break your leg, you know what you need to do.
Right.
When you get a concussion, you know what you need to do. When you get ingrown toenail, you know what you need to do. Your mind is always outside the problem, looking at it from the outside and coming up with ideas. And it's not that scary, it's just painful. But when you go through this, it's not something you'd call painful, but it's something that's terrifying because it hits you in your, not how you see, but in your pane of glass by which you perceive through. And that's why it shuts down. It's 100% disability. For a while, you're not going to deal with it. If I had the matter of fact, Merrill, this is when guys will think of killing themselves, is when they get the thought that this is the new norm and it will never change and I've got to go through this as long as I live and there is no hope. You have to give people the sense of hope, that there is hope.
There have been some Christians who have gone that far because they haven't been able to get control of this. Is that not?
Yes, very much so. And that Christians can sometimes be in the worst place. As a matter of fact, I had a fellow who went through this who said to me, "Be careful who you tell this to." I said, "How do you mean?" He said, "You be careful of saying this to Christians because a pagan will say, 'Have you gotten any help for it?' A Christian will get all Bildad, Zophar, and Eliphaz on you and say, 'What evil have you done?'" And Job, of course, he was saying, his buddies were saying, "You must be in sin to be going through this." Job said, "I shouldn't be going through this because I hadn't been in sin." They both were wrong. Being a pious Christian doesn't mean that you have good karma and you will never, ever go through problems. And whenever you have bad things happen, it's clear that God is not bad karma. Sin is not bad karma. That's one fellow has said that's the most important thing about the book of Job is it teaches that God is not karma, that you don't get to do good and have instant happiness and do bad and have instant pain. It doesn't work like that, and that you have to trust him. And so he said, you just be careful of saying this to Christians because they may quickly talk about your sin, your lack of community. What have you been doing on the sly? You need to quit worrying and things like this. I had not missed a quiet time since 1973. So you couldn't say to me, read your Bible. I read my Bible every year, make notes on it, give it away, and start a new one.
And you weren't really worrying, were you?
No, the only thing I was doing is I was living on adrenaline because I was doing simply too much. Paul talked about the daily pressure upon him of concern for all the churches. And it was that daily pressure of meeting those deadlines. And that's when literally my body gave way. And then shortly after that, I fell into an emotional hole. And so I kind of knew why it came around, but I had no idea. I had no precedence. I had no sympathetic voices that could help me. They had to literally come out of the wall. And I had people in my church, Merrill, that would write me. They told the church, don't visit him, don't call him, just write him. And I'd get letters every day, amazed at people in our church that had been through it and had never, ever talked about it because you weren't supposed to. It was like coming out of the closet that I'd been through that. I found out I had 2 elders and 3 staff that had been through it. And that helped me immensely knowing that there was hope.
You mentioned elders. Pastors are susceptible
Oh,
to
gracious.
this.
I have got I'm a pastoral hotline to guys that you would know. And I have visited with some very well-known guys, and they kind of do feelers. They say, let me ask you something. You know, you did that book. What were some of the things that alerted you? And they're looking at me and nodding, and I can always tell. And I say, my brother, because they're always younger men. And I say, I've been looking at how you're running. You need to be careful. Don't you do what I did. It was Augustine that called his body brother ass, the thing that hauls him around, and you better be careful of wearing down old brother ass because he'll shut down on you and won't move. So I've said that to a lot of the young, gifted guys because modern day will make you you can do more stuff than in the old days when the sun went down and you went home and sat on the Victorian porch. Now it's a lot different. Social media is extremely debilitating emotionally. As a matter of fact, the suicide rate that has gone up so greatly in the last few years, especially guys from 55 and up, that they attribute a lot of it to social media. We never get to rest anymore. We never get to recreate. I remember that psychiatrist saying to me, God made Israel take a Friday night, a Saturday morning, Saturday night, Sunday morning, then you start it again. He shut you down completely by law.
And pastors have pastors' retreats and other things that they try to do to
Yes.
say, as Barney Fife used to, nip it in the bud.
There are numbers of places that pastors get together and deal with this. And when they call me, they're embarrassed. And some of them say they're afraid to go to their elders on this. And I tell them, you have to protect your ability first and let your career come second. You take care of yourself.
So the seminary students who come forward, do they feel like, if I'm having trouble with depression issues, should I not be going in the ministry? Should I avoid that? Or are there concerns about their future that way?
Yeah, I say you shouldn't be going into the ministry right now. We have to back off because this isn't a fungus that you catch. It's not a virus that you catch. Sometimes it can be congenital in families, but it's not something that you caught. This is something that was brought on you by generally pushing too many buttons back to back. We've got to back off a little bit and rest, and let's get this under control, even if you need to take a little time off, that you can get it under control. It's frightening, but it's not terminal.
Let me ask a corollary. Do sometimes a person's spouse come up and say,
yes,
this is what my husband or my wife is going through. What do you think?
Yes, they say, he won't tell you this, but I'm going to tell you. I'm going to rat on him. this is what he is going through. And I say to him, generally, I'll say, you tell him that's all, and you're going to rat him out to me. And you tell him you love him, and you're going to pull what was Nabal's wife, Abigail, and you're going to rat him out. And I will get him on, and I'll say, sit down with me. I say, good buddy, you got a bad problem from a good reason. You work too hard, and you're sensitive, and we're going to back down because you're going to keep this facade up, and you're going to show it out in homes. And it makes your home weary. And let me say to it, whenever you got a mate going through it, the mate makes the difference. My wife always let me know she was with me in it.
Stay with us. We'll be back in just a minute.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Riley Bembry returned from World War I, a changed man. Upon his return, this former Army medic settled in Los Angeles and became a butcher. But the city could not contain him, and he headed into the Mojave Desert and became a prospector. By the time the Great Depression gripped the nation, other veterans of the Great War had found their way to Bembry's cabin, each seeking to escape the emotional and physical scars left from the war. Together in 1934, they erected a simple 7-foot monument atop a rocky outcropping not far from Bembry's cabin, but miles and miles from anything else. They chose a common symbol to honor war dead, a white cross, and dedicated it to honor the dead of all wars. When Bembry died in 1984, Henry Sandoz, Bembry's close friend, began to care for the Mojave Desert Veterans Memorial Cross. In 2001, someone sued. A judge would eventually order the memorial hidden from view, literally covered with a padlocked bag, while the case was decided. First Liberty had the privilege of working with Henry Sandoz, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, the American Legion, and others to defend that memorial. Before he was senator, Ted Cruz volunteered his time as lead counsel on the case. Because of Henry Sandoz, Ted Cruz, Veterans of Foreign Wars, the American Legion, and First Liberty, that memorial still stands today just where Bembry placed it in honor of the dead of all wars. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
You can learn how to protect religious freedom in the workplace, public schools, your church, the military, and more by downloading First Liberty's free Religious Liberty Protection Kits at firstliberty.org. That's firstliberty.org. If you want hope for religious freedom, go to firstliberty.org.
Point of View, Truth Team 360, Beacon of Truth.
This is Nancy from El Paso, Texas, and I strongly support Point of View, and I really would encourage all of you to contribute to this program, continuing and being able to reach out to others. The money that they get from us makes a difference in production, in writing, as well as getting the coordination necessary to present an adequate and complete program. It's a way of God reaching out to all of us.
Point of View, Truth Team 360, Beacon of Truth.
And we're back. Merrill Matthews, and sitting in with us is Tom Nelson, pastor of Denton Bible Church, and we're talking about depression. If you want to talk to Tom, 1-800-351-1212, 1-800-351-1212. If you've wanted to talk to somebody and just reach out to somebody and express some of the issues you're dealing. Tom is not a medical doctor, but he's gone through it, and he knows he has some advice for people. So give us a call, 1-800-351-1212. You can even remain anonymous if you want to. We're going to go now to Lisa in Georgia. Lisa, you're on the air.
Hi.
Go right ahead.
My question is, my husband and I are Christians. We've been Christians for a very long time, and our youngest daughter decided that she wanted to get married not long after high school to her high school sweetheart, and against our wishes, she went ahead and got married, and he's a Marine, and he has a very high-profile job, and just recently she's been expressing to us that she's depressed. They fight a lot, and, of course, our response as Christian parents is, she's out of church right now, and we've encouraged her to get back in church and to make her relationship with God number one in her life, and that he would make a way, for their relationship. Once her relationship with God is right, then her relationship with her husband should improve, we think. But they were home on leave about a week or so ago, and she expressed to me that she's contemplated suicide a few times in the last couple of months, and she expressed a desire to move home, but my husband and I were of the opinion that, she made her bed, she needs to sleep in it, but at the same time, we don't want to have the degree of tough love to where she actually goes through with these thoughts.
Yes, Lisa. Well, let's get Tom to respond on that.
And I have heard this before. This is not the first time I've heard this, Merrill. One of the young ladies at the seminary that I attended said that she would go to seminary and contemplate how she could run into an abutment and make it look like an accident. When you get to the place that you think this will never go away, this is the new norm and there is no help, there is no hope, you feel emotionally alienated from God. Is how you feel. Your sense of guilt grows great under this. I would tell you three things. Number one, make sure that as her family, you are there. You don't say you made your bed. You say, we're so sorry. Even though she married too young, she didn't marry wisely, she hadn't kept her spiritual life up, but you be there with your arms to be around her. And then secondly, she needs to have some spiritual help in her life. There's the old, when you did your experiment in science class where you pumped all of the air out of a gas can and you watched it implode because the pressure from the outside was greater than the inside. Well, she's imploding right now. She probably has as a 22-year-old, she probably has a very mediocre spiritual life. It's probably lacking. Most people that go through this, they're lacking. And they need to simply start them and the Bible, them and prayer, them in attending worship, them in starting to control the things they can control. And then to know that God is sovereign. He said to Peter, Satan's demanded permission to sift you like wheat. I've prayed for you. Your faith will not fail. But after you've fallen, you're going to rise and strengthen your brothers. In other words, I'm in control. You need this pain. I'm there with you, and it's going to be over someday, and you're going to be a better man. She needs to know that. But family needs to be with her. She needs somebody around her where she is to spiritually be nourishing her and helping her, some group of women. And she may need to visit a very competent doctor or a psychiatrist if it starts getting where it is chronic, where it doesn't just come and go, but it's continual. She may need somebody to help her with an SSRI or something to get her out over the depression. And so there is hope, but the hope is found in a process, not merely a counseling appointment, but there's been a few years of immaturity that have begun, and she stacked some weight on an immature frame, and she's crumbling under it. So your surmisal is correct that she acted too quickly, but her body doesn't care that she acted too quickly. She's going down. And so you come near to her, you see if you can get her to a doctor, and then you make sure that she's getting some discipleship and she's eating what the big boys eat biblically. And I've seen this work a number of times with young men and women, that this is the moment of clarity in their life when they realize, I cannot make it on this life by myself. Because at 22, she's been living on her parents' faith, and now she's having to build her own faith. She needs to be in her Bible daily, drinking in the Word of God, and then to have somebody close to her that can counsel her.
Right. She's lives in Washington, D.C., and we're outside of Savannah, Georgia, so we're about 10
If she's
hours
in
away.
D.C., I'm going to be there in a couple of weeks. Tell her to come to McLean Bible Church and listen to what I've got to say.
Oh, I would love that.
I'm going to be right there in, when, buddy, October?
October the 18th and 19th, I believe.
Yeah,
19th,
Friday
20th.
night and a Saturday morning. And you tell her to be there and listen to what I've got to say to her. And it's just good.
Awesome.
It's good old ham and eggs. It's nothing that is exceeding, but it's just going to be good, solid stuff that will help her.
October 19th and October 20th, Friday and Saturday. And,
19th and 20th.
and you know, Lisa, being in Washington these days can be
Washington is
stressful
stressful.
itself.
Yes, her husband's a Marine, and he's the sergeant of the guards for the commandant's house. So it's just a combination of everything. But I guess, should we offer for her to come home until she can?
Possibly, yeah. If she possibly could take a vacation and have a break, and if somebody can start her, what I would ask her is, are you daily spending time progressively reading your Bible and going to God in prayer? And have you ever read Tozer on
Tozer.
on the spiritual life, or Charles Spurgeon on Morning and Evening, which is phenomenal, that are just great devotional guides. At 22, she probably has not independently developed her own spiritual life, and she is caving in under reality. Yeah. So it could do well, her doing a vacation, but she can't just get away from, she's got to get away to something that is going to be a major change in her life, because her spiritual life is probably pretty beggarly right now. It's probably on low.
Lisa, thank you so much for calling. When we come back, I'm going to have Tom go through some of the scriptural references to this, and this is part of what he's been doing, is highlighting what the Bible says about it. So thank you so much, and we need to pray for you in that situation.
Tell her to come say hi to me when she's in Washington.
1-800-351-1212, 1-800-351-1212. We're going to carry this on at the top of the next hour. Tom Nelson talking about depression, and we wanted to address what the Bible says, and she mentioned the Marines, and the military has a problem with this.
It is stressful. The military is stressful.
We'll be back in just a minute.
Protect the health of the nation. Join the Point of View Truth Team. pointofview.net/team. pointofview.net/team. Or call 800-347-5151.
So there's this guy named Jordan. He's a healthy guy. He's a dad of 6, and he works as a guide in Alaska. And he goes to the doctor, true story, he goes to the doctor, and he's diagnosed with cancer, stage 4. And here's the thing. He had switched earlier from medical insurance to Medishare, where Christians share each other's medical bills. So the question for Jordan and his wife, Jenny, was, is this actually going to work?
Our medical bills exceeded $160,000. Medishare members shared all our bills.
And it was about more than just the money, too. This is a real community.
Medishare is a family, a group of people that stick with you through the hardest times of your life. I just don't know how I could have done it without Medishare.
It's so worth looking into. There's a reason this is growing so fast. So if you want to find out more, here is a number for you, 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE.
Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of view, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, your guest host for Point of View.
And we're back. This is Merrill Matthews with the Institute for Policy Innovation, sitting in for Kirby Anderson. And with me today is Tom Nelson, pastor of Denton Bible Church. Tom went through a bout of depression about 10, 12 years ago, and wasn't something he wanted to, but the Lord's used him mightily since then in being able to teach and work with others that are facing this issue. Now, he's got a presentation coming up here on October 19 and October 20 in McLean, Virginia at McLean Bible Church. We have information about that on the Point of View website, pointofview.net. If you go there and go to today's show, you'll find a biography of Tommy there, and underneath that, there's a link there about the program. And if you're watching this, streaming this online, you'll see a chart up there right now, a graph showing what this is about, and information to be able to contact them to see if you're interested in either attending that or if you want to pick it up by live streaming. So that's going to be available. Tom also published a book several years ago on depression, Walking on Water. This sort of tells his story of what he went through and what others can learn from that. Walking on Water, when you feel like you're drowning. We have a link to that book on the Point of View website, so you can go there if you want more information about that. Tom, when we left off, we heard from Lisa and the struggles that she has going. Her daughter married to a Marine.
Right.
This is a real issue for the military, isn't it?
It is. Military is stressful. You start early, schedules become erratic with a lot of people. They travel immensely. I have a son in, what do they call it, Homeland Security, and another son that is a policeman in Fort Worth. And it is great stress that you go through, and schedules or sleep patterns are broken up. And so, yeah, for her to be married to a military man, she's going to have to always keep her hand on her pulse to make sure she's getting her sleep. Incidentally, that's the thing to say to Lisa is, if you're losing your sleep, that's where you have to start. I had a doctor tell me that the easiest thing medical science does is help you sleep. We can help you sleep. We can get stuff over the counter or special stuff that we can make sure that at 10 o'clock you go to sleep, that you get 8 hours and you can renew yourself and you're not worried about not sleeping. And so, yeah, you've got to be on your toes in the military to make sure you're doing okay. 1-800-351-1212, 1-800-351-1212. If you want to call in and talk to Tommy about issues that you're facing, friends are facing, what you might be going through, 1-800-351-1212. Now, Tom, the Bible speaks about this. There's some verses there that can help us. You've been going through that. What do you find there? Well, everybody, when they think depression, you can pick up the Psalms. The Psalms are, a psalm means a melody played on a stringed instrument to the adoration of God. It's the hymn book of the Bible, and it's right dead center in the Bible. God knows you can open it up and find it real quickly, as the book of Psalms. And it's 150 encounters that human beings have with life and with God, and how God takes them through. The Psalms always starts with pain, then you have prayer, and then you have God's intervention, and then you will have praise. And so you constantly go to the Psalms. The book of Job, when you read Job about the bad counsel his friends gave him, and then Job, the bad assumptions Job was making as to why he shouldn't be going through that, the book of Job is so real to me, Merrill, that I no longer can read it from front to back. I have to read from back to front.
Really?
Yeah, it would get so deep into me. When you read your Old Testament narrative, it's not simply rules or what the authors think we ought to be doing. It is life from Genesis all the way through Nehemiah. It's life, and it's humans that deal in pain. When you go to the Gospels, you get the classic man who said, I'm grieved to the point of death.
Mm-hmm.
And he deals in pain. And with Paul and Peter and John and James, you see these men and these women that deal with life. And so the Bible baptizes you in the reality of life. It is the most marvelous encouragement that exists in pain is the Bible and the real life stories of real life humans. C.S. Lewis once said the Bible can't be myth because myth is so much better. The mythic guys are always heroes, they're always strangling snakes with their hands like Hercules. Biblical people are calling out, why are you in despair, O my soul? Hope in God. I will again praise him. They're talking to their bodies. And so make sure you are inundated. Spurgeon said, when you're cut, you need to bleed bibline.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to come out of you.
You mentioned Job in there. Paul had his own struggles in there.
Yes, he talked about the daily pressure upon him, concern for all the church. Would that I were accursed, separated from Christ for the sake of my kinsmen. The time of my departure has come. I have fought the good life. I'm poured out like a drink offering. God, who comforts the depressed, comforted us by the coming of Titus. We were stressed to the point of death, he says. No, Paul had been through great pain. 3 times I asked of God to take away this thorn, and God said to me 3 times, no, my grace is sufficient, much more than I will be content with distresses, persecution. Paul knew about real life and of God taking him through it.
And Paul had that sort of very busy schedule because anytime he landed someplace, he had to speak. People wanted to hear him, and he went on for hours. And one time, a young boy falls out of a window.
Jesus, his boys grabbed him and said, "Let's come apart. The whole world is looking for you."
Well, 800-351-1212. We've got some calls coming in right now. We've got a few more lines if you'd like to talk to Tom Nelson. 1-800-351-1212. We'll get to some of those calls afterwards. Tom, is depression more a male factor or a female factor, or do we know?
I don't know, because I think females talk about it more. It's kind of like abuse.
Are they more willing to be open about it?
It's like sexual abuse. 1 out of 4 girls, 1 out of 6 guys has been abused. Girls will talk about it. Guys won't talk about it. Guys won't talk about their pain. We have a group of women at our church that get together and encourage each other. We're just now starting to get men, because men won't talk about it. They'll suck it up. And Christians also, Merrill, don't like medications.
Mm-hmm.
Men don't like medications. For them to take something to help them, it's all the first go around they won't do it. The second one they won't do it. It takes a good 3 go arounds to get them to do it.
Claudia is on the line. We're going to come to you, Claudia. Stay with us. We'll come right after this break, and we'll begin to we'll take some of your calls, and we'll talk a little bit more about the spiritual inventory that you need to have. So stay with us. This is Merrill Matthews, the Institute for Policy Innovation. 1-800-351-1212. 1-800-351-1212. If you want to talk to Tom Nelson, we'll be back in just a minute.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
A number of columnists and political thinkers have tried to explain why there is so much hate in the public arena. Shelby Steele is a senior fellow at Stanford University's Hoover Institution. He has some profound insights on why the left is consumed with hate. He takes us back to the 1960s when this country finally accepted that slavery and segregation were profound moral failings. So the left put itself in charge of righting this wrong, thus giving it enormous political and cultural power. It also led to the greatest array of government-sponsored social programs in history that have cost more than $22 trillion. He believes that this amounted to a formula for power that goes something like this. The greater the menace to the nation's moral legitimacy, the more power redounded to the left. Soon they had compiled a laundry list of menaces. Racism was at the top of the list, but other bigotry ending in ism and phobia were also making the list. This has created a problem for the left. America has made significant progress in racial issues along with progress with many other issues, and this threatens the left, whose existence is threatened by the diminishment of racial oppression. It must find racism anywhere it can in order to make itself relevant. The white-on-black shooting in Ferguson, Missouri got lots of media attention and even a comment from the President of the United States. During that same period, thousands of black-on-black shootings took place in Chicago, hometown of the then president, yet they inspired very little media coverage and no serious presidential commentary. Today, the left is troubled by its possible obsolescence. There is not enough social menace to service its need for power. It's easy to see why the left is consumed with hate. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores. Point of View, Truth Team 360, Beacon of Truth.
Hi, this is June Hunt from Hope for the Heart. Kirby and his guests are biblically based, and they bring a conservative voice to today's issues. I want to encourage you to honor this ministry with a special financial gift. You can do that at pointofview.net. And Kirby, I thank God for your ministry. You are needed in our world because truth is needed in our hearts.
Point of View, Truth Team 360, Beacon of Truth.
And we're back. This is Merrill Matthews sitting in for Kirby Anderson, and my guest today is Tom Nelson. We're talking about the issue of depression, and let's go to Claudia in Nevada. Claudia, you're on the air.
Hi, Tom. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Oh, boy. I've been listening, and it's pretty awesome that you're out there talking about it. I just wanted to say I'm 24 years retired Navy, married to a former Navy SEAL who is now a police officer, is a sniper on the SWAT team, and we have 8 children blended. I'm in my late 40s, and I just, life has a way of throwing you curveballs.
Yes, it does.
And I just can't emphasize enough the importance of having that relationship with Jesus Christ. Just being grounded, having a support group, a group of mentors and what have you. I listened to the call just a bit ago about that one gal who's married to the young Marine, and it's heartbreaking to just hear that. I just want to reach out into the phone and just kind of be
Mhm.
like, hey, I'm here, you know.
Yep.
But it's real, and I hate the whole stigma that goes along with depression, but it's just like anything else. If you need that extra encouragement and assistance, and I know when we had our OIS, officer involved shooting and stuff, it's, you know, just to be able to have that person to talk to, and then even just understanding what your husbands are going through, and
Yes.
just the fact that we're designed totally different, and how the more and more we relinquish this desire to be in control and follow the blueprint for life, which is God's plan, and fill our roles and stay in our lane, how much more happier things can be. But yeah, I just wanted to chime in because I think it's just extremely important to have that relationship with Christ, be grounded, and to just daily, you know, work these struggles out.
And you know, Tom, the point here that Claudia is making, it seems like, is having a relationship with Jesus doesn't keep you from depression. It helps you move through depression if you get that.
Yeah, that's why the fellow said to me that I met with, he said, this pill you take does not eliminate depression or anxiety, because life doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
That's what makes you strong in life and going through things, but it lets you play with it on a level playing field that doesn't get out of control. You have to, if you have certain things in place, if you have the foundation under you of absolute truth that defines who you are, if you have the compass of how you should live, if you have the big issue settled of your forgiveness of sin and that you have eternity waiting before you, if you have guidance on how to treat people, on how if you have the wisdom on how not to get into adulterous problems, how to get into anger problems, how not to get into financial problems, if you can have the Bible above you, beneath you, before you, that's guiding you, life is going to become a whole lot easier. And when you have moments that are depressing moments, the call at 3 a.m. that someone has died, when you get the call that you have been laid off or whatever, it's painful. You shed your tears, but now God can take you through it a whole lot easier than if you weren't there.
Thank you, Claudia. Let's go to Steve now in New Mexico. Steve, you're on the air.
Well, thank you very much, and it's good to be with you guys today. And under partly cloudy skies here in New Mexico, we're finally blessed with hopefully some wet moisture.
Good. You haven't had enough of that in New Mexico, I guess.
No, we haven't, especially here in the Four Corners area. Hey, I'm going to keep this brief and to the point, but I'm 55 years of age, just recently retired from a college environment, very liberal, as a matter of fact, and on top of that. But what I begin to see is our brain-drained society of all of this technology. Of course, I'm talking on an iPhone as we converse here this afternoon, but I myself, I've fought depression and anxiety and have taken medications before. But the issue here is that have we become more of a society where we just seem to have to constantly respond 24/7, and our minds getting to be programmed as such that we feel that we are not staying up with the times, they would say, because, I can care less about having Facebook and Snapchat and all of that other stuff that people have. I don't have it. But the fact of it, even in the workplace and how we're just programmed in responding in our conversations and discussions on a daily basis, and we get so busy, not being productive, but being so busy that we lose our focus on what Jesus Christ, our Lord, intends us to be and how he shapes us based upon who we are, created in his image.
Boy, I don't need to say anything. He said it. No, when you think of the horror novel motif, it is usually in a Brave New World scenario or the Matrix scenario or the iRobot scenario or the when the world gets so technological. Remember, Buddy, the song we sing when we were kids, in the year 2525.
Right. If man is still alive.
Yes, it just gets, the idea of technology is frightening to us. It's called the dehumanizing or the atomization, ATOM, the atomization, where you're nothing but atoms and rabbits, meaning you're just molecules with a sex drive. The cosmic orphan, the art of the 60s. Remember the Scream and the there's just something about modern man that is frightening. Man is created to be in a garden with his God and to interpret all of life through his God. Originally, man didn't even have clothes. There was nothing to worry him. They have found, Merrill, that, and I don't know who found this, but you know who they are. We don't know who they are, but they're always right. But they say that the happiest people, statistically and by surveys, are the Amish.
Mm-hmm.
Because their life is so incredibly simple. They don't even have to worry about what to put on. It's always black. That they're not technological. They don't get in debt. They work with their hands. They are close to the earth. They do not lose their time. They have they work physically. And to me, I can't operate a computer. I do not own a cell phone. I have one of those drug dealer phones that you can break and burn. But I stay away personally from technology. Some people have to deal with it. But when I look at, the kid, looking at TV that's on a 14-year-old level, or books that are written on such a simple level, and I look at people that don't have time just to, well, amusement means no mind. Amuse means no mind, to be amused. It's so much better to be able to withdraw and to be in the quiet and to spend time in great literature and great books and go to the gym and work your body and sweat and be in good conversation with loved ones over good coffee. To me, technology is frightening. Throw in your 2 bits there, Merrill, because you work with it a lot more than I do.
Well, I do, and it is frightening, and it is getting more frightening. Of course, you have to rely on young people to help you with some of this technology that we deal with, and it creates new stresses that we never had before.
Yes, it does.
But the interesting thing is it helps us in some ways and just makes things. I see people who feel like I cannot. You get on an elevator day and they're all looking at their phones.
Yeah.
Nobody's talking anymore. And if their phone is not working or they've just run out of power, they are upset because they don't have the ability to be able to do that connection. It's created a strange new pressure on us. 1-800-351-1212, 1-800-351-1212. Thank you, Steve, for calling. That's the number if you'd like to call and talk to Tom Nelson about the issue of depression and some of the things that he's doing. He's going to be giving a presentation here on October 19th and October 20th, over 2 days. So it's going to be a long one. You have the ability to be able to go and see that.
Well, it's 4 hours, 2 hours at night, 2 hours in the morning.
It's a long discussion. So you'll be tired. It'll probably put a little stress on you. But you've gotten to where you can do this well. So if you'd like to talk to Tom, 1-800-351-1212 and 1-800-351-1212, and we'll be back in just a minute.
Protect the health of the nation. Join the Point of View Truth Team. pointofview.net/team. pointofview.net/team. Or call 800-347-5151.
So there's this guy named Jordan. He's a healthy guy. He's a dad of 6, and he works as a guide in Alaska. And he goes to the doctor, true story, he goes to the doctor and he's diagnosed with cancer, stage 4. And here's the thing. He had switched earlier from medical insurance to Medishare, where Christians share each other's medical bills. So the question for Jordan and his wife, Jenny, was, is this actually going to work?
Our medical bills exceeded $160,000. Medishare members shared all our bills.
And it was about more than just the money, too. This is a real community.
Medishare is a family, a group of people that stick with you through the hardest times of your life. I just don't know how I could have done it without Medishare.
It's so worth looking into. There's a reason this is growing so fast. So if you want to find out more, here is a number for you, 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE.
Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, your guest host for Point of View.
And welcome back. This is Merrill Matthews with the Institute for Policy Innovation, sitting in for Kirby Anderson today. And with me is Tom Nelson of Denton Bible Church. And we're talking about depression. And there's a number of stories out there, Tom. We're going to start out, since we've got several calls, we're going to go to Valerie in Texas. Valerie, you're on the air.
I'm talking about depression.
Hello?
Valerie, yes, you're on the air.
Yes. This is me. Okay, so I just wanted to share a little bit of my story with you because I'm very passionate about this topic, about mental health in general.
Go right ahead.
I'm a 24-year-old medical student over in El Paso, Texas, and I actually have a really extensive background of dealing with panic disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, and chronic depression. I actually just got those diagnoses last year when I finally sought help from a psychiatrist. I grew up in a very strict Christian household, and my parents never allowed me to have the care of a psychiatrist. And going to the doctor, I wasn't really allowed to talk about like anxiety or anything like that because my parents thought that I was severely oppressed. So I always say that I was born with anxiety because I was just so fearful as a child. I was afraid of my father. I had a severe attachment to my mother. I wouldn't let anybody else touch me. And I had real phobia of people. And I was just a really odd little girl. And I had OCD growing up. And I heard all these voices inside of my head. And I had to do little rituals. If I didn't obey those rituals, something bad would happen, or so I thought in my head.
So you've had a number of challenges over the years.
Oh, yes, and since a young child, and I remember growing up and always asking Jesus why I want to be healed, and my parents would take me for deliverances, and I would never get healed, and I guess as I grew up, it really weakened my faith, and my three other siblings are just bright and happy as can be. They're so lovely. And I'm the only one that ended up like this. And my parents, I would always get in trouble because my parents would get after me and say, stop being so nervous, stop, and I would have panic attacks, and I would go to the ER, and they just said it's just anxiety. And
well, Valerie sounds like a number of challenges. Let's get Tommy's to weigh in on this.
Boy, I wished I could have talked to her parents. And said, when your child goes through something like this, the worst thing you can do is incriminate them by what are you doing. Your arms need to go about them. You don't treat them as demons need to be cast out. You let them know that your mom and dad love you, and we're going to have a regimen in your life, not simply of rules and regulations and of kind of Christian legalism, Protestant legalism, but rather
it's out there.
Yeah, but rather the input of the Bible. Because once you get into the Bible, all of a sudden you find this God who made you and loves you and guides you and dies for you and takes you home, and all things work for good. And he is the best possible dream of man. And then if you have some of these problems that are staying with you, we're going to go work on these and find out how we can get on top of them. But you don't always get on the end on the successful end of emotional and mental problems quickly, but you always let a kid know that we're in process and we're going to do whatever we got to do to get on this. And your family is your best friend, and we're here for you. We're surrounding you. And that's a can't lose kind of scenario right there.
Does that help out, Valerie?
Definitely does, and I just want to share that even to this day, when I go back down for holidays, my parents, they just completely disagree with the decision I've made to be on an antidepressant and anti-anxiety and to have cognitive behavioral therapy. And so they always talk me out of it, and they hate to see me even take the medication. And so my dad always says, just get rid of it. Get rid of it. And it's just so difficult to get rid of it. And he actually came from a Pentecostal background, but then as he grew older, transitioned into more of the non-denominational Christian perspective. But still, it was like demons was always a conversation in the household. And he would see demons, my older sister would, and I was just scared to death. And I was just always so fearful. And it's like, to this day, it's like depression's awful because you cry every single day and you don't want to. You really don't want to, and you just hear horrible thoughts in your head. And depression, I really do think it's I'm not sure if it's a spirit of depression. I mean, that's what I was always told, but I just know that it is real. Mental health issues are real, and people do have to address them. And it's really hard to speak out about them, especially in the Christian faith, because sometimes it will look and it appears. I know I always thought that, maybe people think that I don't even know Jesus, or maybe I'm not even saved because I have, these mental health conditions. And it was always a point of conflict for me to even mention it, just to appear like that. Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, you just immerse. How old are you?
24.
24. Boy, when I was 24, I got saved at 22. You just start every year. What I do is I'll read my Bible every year at about 3 chapters a day, and I'll read it a couple of times a day, and I'll make notes on it, go all the way through it, give my Bible away to a nephew and get a brand new one. And I've been doing that since Gerald Ford was president. And every day I withdraw and I write down what I pray for, and I spend time with God in prayer. And every day I do what I love. I love to go to the gym and work out, do it 6 times a week. I love to get on a treadmill and run for about 45 minutes. I do that 6 or 7 times a week. I drink good coffee and protect my mornings and protect my evenings. And you do that, and life is going to become a whole lot better, because you're just turning the corner. You're establishing your own faith. You read the great works that the great men wrote. You go pick you up a book called Church History in Plain Language by Bruce Shelley, and you read that book 2 or 3 times, and you will know what less than 0.5% of Christians know. You read what Francis Schaeffer wrote.
Yes.
You read the Narnia Chronicles by C.S. Lewis and deepen your mind in the great things the great men wrote. You read Augustine's Confessions and bury yourself in the greatness of human truth, true composition, and you are going to be happier than a duck.
Well,
I will assure you.
Thank you for calling, Valerie. Let's go to Orban, I believe it is now in Texas. Orban, you're on the line.
Okay, thank you, guys. I just wanted to express something that I went through with my late wife. She went through a real bad depression, and the family kind of took control and made her go, go, go. And she said, Orban, it was the wrong decision. I was worn out from college, and I was tired. And she said, that was a bad decision they made me go through. So I think what you're talking about is getting sleep and rest rather than having somebody take control and make you go, go, go.
Oh, yeah.
I think there's a lot to that.
Generally, people that are going through depression or anxiety are probably not sleeping. And when you're not sleeping, you start worrying at about 5 o'clock that you're not going to be able to sleep. And the easiest thing medical science can do is Benadryl or something, or Tylenol or lorazepam or something to help you be able to go to sleep and rest. And now you just eliminated about 30% of your problem. And so, yeah, go, go, go is what gets you in this problem. Rest, rest, rest is going to get you out of it. As a matter of fact, in the old days when you went to a clinic, it was to go away to Colorado somewhere and be out in nature and just rest and get away from telephones. And that's where you started, was just resting.
Hard to do then these days, isn't it?
Almost impossible. You know, it's interesting, but in the Bible, the city is always terrifying. Enoch starts the first city, or Cain, and named after his son. Then you get Sodom and Gomorrah. Then you get Nimrod that started building cities. And the only city in the Bible that is safe is the city of God. It's Jerusalem, the city of peace. You remember the Rechabites? We will never, ever enter a city because we know that cities can be dangerous. Abraham would camp between Bethel and Ai. The city is dangerous. Lot learned it the hard way. Stay out in the nature of Eden. That Eden is a Hebrew word that means delight. Just spend time with God out alone in nature and make your life just visit the city and get out of it quickly. And life's going to be a lot better.
Thank you, Orban. We are going to go to Rose next after we take this break. If you want to talk to Tom Nelson about depression issues, 800-351-1212, 351-1212, and Rose will be coming back to you next.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Riley Bembry returned from World War I a changed man. Upon his return, this former Army medic settled in Los Angeles and became a butcher. But the city could not contain him, and he headed into the Mojave Desert and became a prospector. By the time the Great Depression gripped the nation, other veterans of the Great War had found their way to Bembry's cabin, each seeking to escape the emotional and physical scars left from the war. Together in 1934, they erected a simple 7-foot monument atop a rocky outcropping not far from Bembry's cabin, but miles and miles from anything else. They chose a common symbol to honor war dead, a white cross, and dedicated it to honor the dead of all wars. When Bembry died in 1984, Henry Sandoz, Bembry's close friend, began to care for the Mojave Desert Veterans Memorial Cross. In 2001, someone sued. A judge would eventually order the memorial hidden from view, literally covered with a padlocked bag, while the case was decided. First Liberty had the privilege of working with Henry Sandoz, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, the American Legion, and others to defend that memorial. Before he was senator, Ted Cruz volunteered his time as lead counsel on the case. Because of Henry Sandoz, Ted Cruz, Veterans of Foreign Wars, the American Legion, and First Liberty, that memorial still stands today just where Bembry placed it in honor of the dead of all wars. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
You can learn how to protect religious freedom in the workplace, public schools, your church, the military, and more by downloading First Liberty's free Religious Liberty Protection Kits at firstliberty.org. That's firstliberty.org. If you want hope for religious freedom, go to firstliberty.org.
Point of View, Truth Team 360, Beacon of Truth.
When my children were very small, I started listening, and even before they were school-aged, my eyes started being opened, and I started realizing that there was another religion being taught in our public schools, and I just wanted to let y'all know today I am joining. I just feel like that if the information is not there, then a lot of other ministries will not even have a chance to be where they are and do what they do.
I always wanted to give because I thought that Point of View really brings a lot of things out here in the open that you don't hear anywhere else. And it's unbelievable how much control they have over the minds of the people in this country and around the world. It's hard for me to believe that people fall for all of this junk that they spread around. But what I like, Kirby and Penna, and I knew when I was hearing on there, well, I could count on it being something that you could about check into it, and the proof would be there.
Point of View. Truth Team 360, Beacon of Truth.
And Merrill Matthews sitting in for Kirby Anderson today. We've been talking depression with Tom Nelson from Denton Bible Church. And we're in our last segment. We've got a few more calls here we want to take. So let's go to Rose in Maine. Rose, you're on the air.
Yes, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, hi. I have a little boy. He's 12 years old, and he has Asperger's, and he was taken from me 18 months ago tomorrow. And I can't tell you the amount of pain and suffering and anguish that I have gone through. And every single thing that you said to do, God has whispered and told me to do that in 18 months. Rose, go get some coffee. Rose, go take a walk in the woods. It would be snowing out. There'd be freezing rain, and I would run in the woods up and down the hills, and everywhere I would hear him say to me, "Don't you know I love you?" I'd walk in the woods, and my face would be totally red. I'd have snow all over me. I started drawing, and I can't even draw. And when my son would come over, he'd look at this paintings, and he goes, "Mama, I can't believe you did that." I said, "Honey," I said, "love came into my fingers."
Well,
and
Rose,
I'm just amazed what the Holy Spirit does when we are so broken, and what He does to us. You know, if we listen, if we go into His Word, if we ask Him to help us, and I have an LCSW that is, he's like 70 years old. He's just wonderful. And I have a lawyer that is occasionally helping me, and he's a Christian. Unbelievable. And I have 2 African pastors that have prayed over me. They're from the Congo and prayed. People need to go back and have themselves prayed over, a generational prayer, because there can be things coming in that they had when they were child and their parents. And it's just so much. And I know I slightly go still through the depression, and I'll hear God say, "Okay, go out and check out those pumpkins today." I was just outside checking the pumpkins.
You'll get to see a lot of them here in the next few weeks. Well, Tom, you have anything for
Yeah,
Rose?
a lot of times, Merrill, that depression can come through well, give you a good example. You remember Muhammad Ali?
Mm-hmm.
Whenever he would box, Muhammad Ali was 6'4", and what he would do is he'd get into the corner and he'd take his hand, his left, and he'd put it behind his opponent's head, around his neck, and he'd pull. Now, that's illegal, but he would do it just a little bit, and then they'd break him. A little bit, and they'd break it up. A little bit, and they'd break it up. But it's just constantly pulling from behind your head. And if you'll do that over a 40-minute fight, every time you pull, you have to resist it with your neck, your back muscles, your gluteals, your hamstrings.
Mm-hmm.
And after 40 minutes, you're whipped. And he knew that he could just do a little tug, a little tug, a little tug, and pretty soon you were given out. And a lot of times life will do that. It's that constant tug. And what this young lady has shared, this is a little bit different. This isn't a constant tug. This is a crucial, painful, disemboweling event. And a lot of times, I have a nephew that the state came and took their 2 adopted kids that had just gotten close with them and in love with them. 3 kids, and all of a sudden, they took them from them. And it was just like, you couldn't say they're just adopted kids. They were their kids, and they took them after months and months, and it plunged them into a painful experience. And so sometimes you can have, and I'm not sure of the events surrounding the taking of an Asperger's child, but an Asperger's child in itself is a painful event.
Yeah.
An autistic child, to lose a child, to have a child taken from you, though, I can't think of much more that can be that painful. And when you continually remember that and you think, where are they doing? How are they doing? That is a constant source of pain. And so there's no way you can get around it. You can't go get hypnotized and act like, well, it really didn't happen. You have to live through it. But like she is saying, you constantly counterbalance that with the truth of God and being alone with God and going to prayer with God and doing all that you can to keep the equilibrium. And that really, Merrill, is all any of us can do, because I could say, Merrill, what are you struggling with right now? And you could give me a list of things. Just watching the news can do it.
Yeah.
And you have to keep a constant counterbalance of being anxious in nothing and everything by prayer, supplication, thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. All Scripture is inspired by God and profitable. Teach, reprove, correct, training in righteousness, be adequate, equipped for every good work. Do not neglect the assembling of yourselves together, but encourage one another, all the more that we're constantly going to God to help us make it through the night. Everybody goes through that.
So what have you learned? Give us 30 seconds. What have you learned since you wrote your book?
I have learned not to go off my medication simply because I want to, that I have realized that I'm one of those 61% of people 37% that needs to just stay on it. I have also learned the importance of the simple life, of pastoring my church, keeping my nights free. I went, after I had kind of come out of this, Merrill, I went down to our Denton used bookstore that's a big, massive bookstore. And I realized how long it had been since I had read simply for the pure joy of reading, not for preparation. And I went down, and it was like having this overwhelming appetite. And I went in the theological session, of the Christian history session of that bookstore, and I picked up like 20 books on Christian church history. Couldn't even put them in my library. I put them in the trunk of my car and drove around until I would read one, and then I'd take it, put it in the library, take another one out of the trunk, and I read those books within about a year, a trunk full of books, because I was famished, and I had never realized how much I had yearned for just the pure joy of being out by myself with good coffee and just reading what I enjoyed. And I'm not going to go there again. I read continually now.
Well, if you've found something that you're interested in, Tom will be speaking at McLean Bible Church in Vienna, Virginia, October 19th and October 20th, 2 hours on both days, talking about this. And you can find out more from Point of View on this. You can go to our website, go to today's show, and you'll be able to click on that and find out more about it. And Tom, thanks so much for joining us, and we will talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Merrill.
April 18th, 1775. The long-feared approach of danger was now real. The British were moving, and Paul Revere mounted his horse for a ride that would go down in history in the battle for American liberty. 2 beacons were placed in the steeple of the Old North Church, alerting the people in Charlestown the Redcoats were coming by sea. 2 beacons shining in the night, signaling our forefathers to make their stand. Today's threats to our freedom are perhaps less visible than an army on the move, but they are no less real. Where are today's beacons, today's defenders of liberty? One is Point of View Radio. The other is you. Together, let us stand for all of our freedoms to preserve what our founders won. Be the fire in our beacon today by joining the Point of View Truth Team. Join the fight this week at pointofview.net/team. Pointofview.net/team, or call 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.